we've been, this segment for these 2 months is on the parental values. And I don't know if you got to watch all 3 of the parental value videos, but I can't think of anything right now in our country more important. And last month, with just the men, you remember we talked about fatherless America, what that's like and why, and the detriment that it is. Because the percentage of children growing up in America right now with either not having a father in the household, or the father that they have in the household would be better if they weren't. And I've seen some of this firsthand lately. I was helping out a friend while I was helping my brother out in Riverside this week, and he manages some very low-income apartments. And I went there to help him do a couple of things, and it's like this mom, the woman that was in there, 3 kids, she looked like she was 12, and the guy that's the baby daddy that was in there, he looked like he was probably 17, 18, but he can't actually live in the household, because if he does, then she can't get all the welfare stuff that she gets. And that is way more common right now. And not just in, and I'm not talking about, I mean, you'd think that would just be a, like a ghetto type family. But no, we're talking about families that you would see at some, you could go to some church, visit some church and see families that you wouldn't know that that's what they go home to. That's where they're at. And so it's definitely a crisis in that. But even more so, one of the things that's been the most difficult part of the Manhood That Matters paradigm in getting across to people, from early on, anyone who's not married or does not have children just believes it's not for them, because we focus on the whole marriage paradigm. So talk to me for a minute. Why would you think that the parental values are important for everyone? Anybody want to make a stab at that? Why is it so critical that every one of us embrace the parental values?
Because there's so many fatherless homes.
And how does that affect me if I'm not a parent? So what? Right? What does that do to me?
One of those kids could end up shooting you because they don't have any moral compass.
Right. What were you going to say?
Yeah, they wouldn't have anything to look that further extent.
So it affects all of society, right? It does. It affects. It comes back to us. So it is in everyone's best interest for the next generation to come out okay. Do you think that society is morally better or worse than it was 100 years ago? Worse. Tell me in what ways. How is society morally worse off today than it was 100 years ago?
Less respect.
Okay, less respect, which is really true. We talk about this a lot, that we no longer have civility in civilization, right? There is no respect for anybody. I mean, you could go to the grocery store and just walk by somebody, and the slightest little thing is a provocation that you think, wow, there was a time when there would have just been a certain level of just common respect. We don't see that anymore. And it affects everybody. So how did we get there? How did it become like that? Did the government legislate a lack of, what's that?
Relative truth.
Okay, I would agree with that statement, but how did relative truth take a foothold in our society? So did the government legislate? Let's don't be moral. So in other words, because the government, for example, passed a law that makes it same-sex marriage legal, is that what did it?
Lack of parenting.
Okay, lack of parenting. Okay, and again, see, we tend to think that we want to blame those parents. But see, we know now statistically this is the children of everyone. The rarity of having children like Bob, children and grandchildren, right? You got some great kids, right? That's the exception right now. I'm talking the high majority of children of evangelical families. And again, I'm not talking about it's not just that they're away from not walking with the Lord. It's that their values and what they believe, even in Christian kids growing up that are going to church, that they haven't left the faith, and yet they have like Tom said, a relative truth. Right? I listen to Christian young people. I am so sick of, if I have to read one more article on why millennials are leaving the church. Right? Because it's almost like we're making excuses or justifying that there's, oh, well, for them it's not their fault. Well, in a certain sense, maybe it's not. It's us, but see, we've got to come to recognize this, that there's a reason this happened. Are children born naturally moral?
No.
In fact, let me tell you something interesting. I was a history major, and I love history. And one of my favorite things that I studied in history was modern Europe. And when you study modern Europe, what they call modern Europe is the early 1900s. That's what, and so I had to do a study one semester of Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud. And as the study of modern Europe. Okay, and people don't understand where these guys came from. So Karl Marx, by the way, Pastor, the Karl Marx and Charles Ingalls, you're talking in the Revelation study on Tuesday night about there are people that believe that Revelation is historical, that it's all happened. Karl Marx and Charles Ingalls wrote a whole book on that. See, a lot of people don't know that he grew up in a Christian home, and now he wrote the Communist Manifesto totally void of knowing what the world was really going on in the world. But here's the thing. Everything in the Communist Manifesto would work if it weren't for one flaw. Everything that he wrote in the Communist Manifesto was based on one belief, and that is, he believed that people are basically good at heart, and if you simply give them a level playing field, they will do the right thing. Now, we know in Scripture exactly the opposite is true. People are basically evil at heart. You're born with a propensity to sin, not a propensity to do right. And left to your own devices, you will choose wrong every time. And unless there's somebody there to guide that brain, I like what, I haven't listened to him in years, but Rush Limbaugh, that line of his, he said, those young minds full of mush. we got to get those young minds full of mush. And so if we don't get what's really going on, the big picture of why parenting is so important in God's design, then we're not going to understand this and understand what it is that not only as individual fathers and men and mothers and wives, but as the church, as the body of Christ, we have to look at a bigger picture that if we just left it off. So, for example, Bob, I know that you could be good at help us with this because this had to have been difficult for you, although I know you prayed and God did this. But I have, for example, some friends that I've been coaching for quite a number of years, and they have two daughters. And they have a daughter that's 16 now. No, actually, she just turned 17. And a daughter that is 12. And these are just incredibly, so far in their lives, well-behaved, godly young ladies. You could ask them the values and all that. So he's been raising them up in these values that we've been talking about their whole lives, right? And he's done a really good job with this. But here is what I challenge him with, because he's not in a place and in a church that promotes those values and that does that. So I asked him, where are you going to find husbands for your daughters that share those same values? Can you relate to that, Bob? Was it difficult finding? I mean, you know how you raised your girls. And you had to pray that God would bring those like values.
And we did from the moment of birth.
Right, from the moment of birth. And that's what's...
That God would provide them the kind of man that we felt that was godly.
So you understood the intentionality from birth.
Absolutely.
See, and without that, we just kind of go through the flow and hope they choose well. Very few families have a plan. And remember, if you looked at the videos, and I talked about the fact that Barna Research did a 40-year study of Christian families, and in which they wanted to determine what did families do, Christian families, that would ensure their kids grow up and have godly families. And one of the things that they came to after 4 years, they couldn't find a common denominator. They had quite a few that were successful, but they couldn't narrow it down to one plan that they could say, well, this plan was the plan that worked. And finally, one of the researchers was going back through the data, and he said, okay, I know what the common denominator is. It's not what plan they used, it's that every family that was successful had a plan from birth. In other words, they chose, they had an intentionality of what they were doing in raising those kids. And so if we don't get that, if we don't understand that these children are born with the propensity to do wrong, not with a propensity to do right. Now, you remember the video that I showed with Dennis Prager talking about the Ten Commandments, and he talked about the fact that not only could we not have morality without the Ten Commandments, those would mean nothing if there wasn't a God that abides it. Why? Because people, he makes it very clear that when he says, I'm not saying that if you don't believe in God, if you're an atheist, that you cannot be moral. I'm saying that if you don't believe in God, you most likely won't be moral. Because it's not that you don't know what's morally right. We do things that we know are morally wrong all the time, right? And when we get to this whole concept of parenting and of understanding what it is that we're doing to train them, that's where we're going to get this. So now this is a strong statement that I've made both in the book and on the videos. Listen to it again. We've raised a generation of self-centered, selfish people with an entitlement mindset. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Okay, so tell me about that. Where do you see that?
Everywhere.
Give me an
I'm an
example.
example of that. My grandparents were godly Christian people. They had 7 boys and 2 girls. They grew up on a farm. They required my father to go to church with them every Sunday, even when he was an adult. The problem is that my father did not carry on that legacy, and I looked at my father and I said, this stuff can't be real, because my father would not act the way he's acting. And for that, I decided that the only way I was going to survive was to grab what I could when I could, no matter what, no matter who I hurt. And that's the way I grew up.
By the way, I'll tell you what I like in that illustration, Mike. When I was growing up, and this is very different in Christianity today, I never remember ever in my life having to ask my parents on Sunday morning if we were going to church. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I knew Sunday morning we were getting up and we were going to church, period. There was no, well, unless this comes up or that comes up, or, well, we have this today, or there's an angel game, early today, and, it's a tough choice, I know, but you get what I'm saying, is that it was a completely different. So give me some more examples of if we're saying, if I'm making this, because that's a pretty strong statement. I'm saying we've raised a generation.
Well, you can just see from the election that these kids and these people didn't get their way, so they had
that's awesome.
7-month, 8-month hissy fit.
Yeah. I mean, literally, what we thought was the standard of freedom in America and free speech and all that now is being turned on its head because of this very thing right here. And why is that? Because parenting in Western culture has been abdicated. My nephew sent me an article this last week in which he actually had to make sure that he put on the tag to me. He said, "This is not the Babylon Bee or the Onion." You know what the Babylon Bee is? It's a satirical Christian news thing. So in other words, it's not real, it's fake, but it's just funny stuff. It's satire. It's saying things like, talking about this Baptist church in the South that accidentally entered that mannequin challenge on Sunday morning in their worship service. They didn't move a muscle for 30 minutes. It's that kind of thing, and this whole fake news like that. But he had to tell me, this isn't fake news. Here's what the article was. It was a woman, a psychologist, talking about, and I thought it was a joke, and it was an absolute real thing. She said, "I, from the time of birth, do not ever pick up my children without asking their permission first. And I started it in the crib. Because I've taught them that nobody has a right to invade. They are sovereign, beings, that I don't have the right to pick them up without asking them first." And somebody asked her, she said, when people ask, "Well, how does your baby tell you that?" "Oh, I can see it in their eyes." I can't make this up. I mean, it sounds like satire, but you see, that's what I'm saying, is that we've abdicated the whole. And again, I'm not talking about just as individuals. As a collective society, we've decided that parenting is no longer necessary. In fact, it's almost like we want the the children to parent us, to tell us what they need, what they want, what we should do in relationship to them. Okay? So how do we make sense of all this? And again, looking at these, the parental values, why this is so critical. You remember this in one of the videos? This whole big thing, especially in the election, you heard this phrase a lot. We need to leave a better planet for our children. Don't you think we need to start thinking we need to be better children to our planet? We literally have focused more on, quote, raising the planet than raising our children. So we have a deliberate philosophy away from parenting. How are we going to get this back? Now, the whole concept of parenting is a biblical design that is... Now remember, when we talk about living that matters, okay, what is the living that matters paradigm say? The only living that matters
is living by God.
Is living by God's design. Okay? Why? Because I believe God created and designed what? The universe. You can go to Alpha Centauri. Any scientists, how far away is that? How many trillion light years? And the same laws apply there as apply here. Okay? God's design is universal, literally universal, and never change. Right? Gravity didn't just come into being in modern times. It always has been, it always will be, until God decides to change it, right? So, God's design for parenting is universal, it's worldwide. I want to be careful here, but I heard a very well-known pastor this last week talking about his belief that the Bible is intentionally vague on structure of the church so that it can evolve with culture and society. I got to tell you, I completely disagree with that. First of all, I don't think the Bible is vague. It's vague on the particulars of certain structural things, but the principles are very clear. In fact, it goes back to one of the things here at the Gate Church is that our mission statement is to develop fully devoted followers of Christ. And the living that matters paradigm within that is to develop fully devoted followers of Christ by returning to the biblical model of the family being the model for the church and not the church the model for the family. So it's pretty clear on the structure of the family in the Bible. Wouldn't you say? We've looked at that. When we looked at the relational value, is it detailed? Is it clear how it works? Yes. Right? Okay? And that's the church. He said, this is a great mystery, but I'm speaking in reference to Christ and His church. Okay, same structure, same principle. Okay, and so when we evolve that, it gets a mindset of thinking that God's design changes, but it's universal. I came across this that I thought was pretty cool. Uh-oh, call CPS. The design of the universe is everywhere, right? When we talk about the whole authority and submission, you could see it in the furthest reaches of the universe, all the way down into the smallest things. What's the difference, though, between animal parenting and human parenting? How is it different? Anybody want to take a stab at it? I know you're afraid to answer because you're afraid I'm going to say, wrong answer. What do you think is the difference, though, between... Because we see that those things are in... It's everywhere, right? Look at that. I mean, that looked just like my kids and my grandkids. Okay, what's the difference? Okay? Animals teach behavior. Only humans teach morality. There's no moral code. And there's been tons of research. I literally have poured through hours and hours and hours of all these different studies trying to make a case that animals have morality. Now, we know they experience emotions, but that's not the same as morality. They can be sad, and they can hurt each other and do things like that. But they don't really distinguish or make moral judgments right from wrong, right? It's these certain learned behaviors. Have you ever read of the 5 monkeys experiment? It's a very famous experiment where they put these 5 monkeys in a little room, in a little cage, and they suspend this bunch of bananas from the ceiling with a ladder, right? So pretty soon, one of the monkeys starts up the ladder to grab a banana, and as soon as they do, the trainer sprays cold water on that monkey, knocks him off the ladder, and then sprays all the other monkeys with freezing cold water. And so they all run to the edge of the cage, and pretty soon another monkey goes to try to go up and sprays that monkey and then sprays the other one. After a couple of times of that, every time a monkey would go up the ladder to get it, the other monkeys would grab it, pull it off the ladder, and beat him up. Right? And so then what they would do is, they slowly would take one of those monkeys out and bring in a monkey that wasn't there, right? And they would no longer spray the water, but what would happen is that new monkey now would go up the ladder and try to get the banana, and the other monkeys would take him off and beat him up. And then they slowly replaced it to where they got with 5 monkeys that were never sprayed with the water, but they would not let the other monkeys go up and get the banana. Right? Now, the difference in human parenting is that we can teach that morality and we can reason. It's not just teaching behavior. Now, we talk a lot about this. about how most parenting, when I started doing this 20-something years ago, when I first started teaching what I now has become the Living That Matters paradigm, believe it or not, there was very little. I would say more of 30-something years ago, because there was very little books on parenting. There was a few. There was the big Spock, Dr. Spock, not Mr. Spock, right? Which, if you read my book, you know I don't have a very high view of that book. I think it's what we talked earlier of the self-centered. I think that was some of the beginnings. It was that book changed the way we view that. Okay, but there was very few, and then when there was some secular ones came along, but then there was almost nothing Christian-wise until Dobson came along, and Dare to Discipline was this overnight success, but now today it's just the opposite. You Google Christian parenting, you're going to get 50,000 hits, right? But I'm telling you that 95% of everything you're going to find on research on parenting is behavior-based, and it's reactive. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, it's focused on telling you how to control your child's behavior. And when I say reactive, it means I've got a strong-willed child, what do I do? I don't want my children to take drugs, what do I do? I want to keep my kids from having sex, what do I do? Right? It's reactive. In other words, they don't teach this is God's design for parenting. This is the purpose and plan of parenting. Learn this from the beginning. No, it's we're so screwed up, how do we fix it? And how do we get behaviors under control? Well, then we're being no different than the animal world. Right? The animals can do that. We're different. However, the process is the same. And again, if you watch the videos, you'll see what I mean. See, the difference between one of the primary differences between discipline and punishment, right, is that punishment appeals to the conscious mind. It's the threat of, if you do that again, I'm going to inflict pain on you to try to influence behavior, right? Discipline appeals to the subconscious mind. It's training. Now, it was so ironic when I was editing the video for the video last week on those things. I was watching, and I had forgotten last year that at the time that I originally made that video right in here in the seminar, that my wife has 7 sisters, and once a quarter, several of them get together for a weekend away. And it just happened, ironically, that last year when I did that, it was one of those weekends she was away. Now, and so I told this story, and then it was the same this week, because she has 7 sisters. It's usually 2 or 3, but this week, for the first time in 10 years, all 8 girls have been together all week. So I've been a bachelor. Now, I don't believe in making the bed. I think it's stupid. I'm going to get back in it tonight. What's the point in making it, right? But my wife will not get into an unmade bed. That's her value, right? And then another thing, in the shower, she insisted, we got this squeegee, and when you take a shower, you have to squeegee the shower down. Again, I don't care. I'll clean it off later, do whatever. Okay? But, we had, early in our marriage, we were always arguing about those things, because she had asked me to do all this stuff, and I would never, ever do it. And I was telling him the story in the video, if you saw it, is that when the first time this happened, she had gone away for one of those girls' weekends, and I didn't realize it until I looked back and I said, oh my gosh, she ruined me. And I called her up and I said, you ruined me. She goes, what are you talking about? I said, you're not here. And she goes, yeah. I said, I made the bed. I couldn't help myself. I'm going to tell you, even again this morning, I literally tried to not squeegee the shower. It was weird. I couldn't make myself do it. Why? She used to get upset with me and try to get me there, but see, over time, in a different way, she's trained my subconscious brain to where I don't have a choice. See the difference in that? It conditions that. See, it's a completely different thing. So the process is appealing to the subconscious mind. And what we've done over time for the last several generations is that we have influenced the subconscious mind to where these riots with the election, all that kind of stuff. And we get upset with them. We think that's stupid, but they don't know another way to behave. We have trained them to be that way. We have influenced them to be that way. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to get this back on track? See, and I talked about last month, remember we talked about that study where the guy shows why he doesn't believe there's a way back for religion, because it's a generational thing. I disagree with him. I think we can get it back. But it's going to take a group of men like you and I. Remember that deal last week? Will you make a difference? We have to do that. What are the 3 parental values? Anybody want to take a stab? What's the first parental value? And there's a reason I'm asking you this. And don't be embarrassed, but be embarrassed. What's the first parental value?
It's not about us, it's about God.
No, that's close. It's a 2-parter. You mixed up the 2 parts.
It's not about us, it's about them. It's not about them.
There you go. I knew you had it. I know how it is, the brain goes. It's not about us, it's about them. It's not about them, it's about God. All right? See, what we've done is we've made it all about them. Right?
Yeah.
That's where we've gotten on track with God's design. We got and understood that it's not about us, it's about them, but now we made it all about them. Everything in our culture, society is geared towards children. It's geared towards being youth, catering to their needs rather than our needs. That's why that psychologist lady that, man, to actually say that she won't pick up her children without asking their permission. That's insane, right? Because we made it all about them. So how do we model for them how they're to be? That's the same way I think we've done in the church, where we've gone to the society community and said, okay, what do you think church should be? What would make you want to come to church? We'll do it that way. That's not how you follow God's design. That's reactive again, right? Okay, so it's not about us, it's about them. It's not about them, it's about God. What's the second one? One of the most misunderstood of all the parental values is the second one. I'll give you a little hint. What is a parent?
A father and mother.
A father and a mother is a parent. Why is that important?
Well,
Why is it important that a father and a mother is a parent?
We've seen the effect of a one-parent household. It doesn't work. That's God's.
Yeah, we talked about that all last month, the fatherless America, but it's more than that. If you understand what it is that parenting is trying to do, which we're going to look at in a moment, then you realize it takes both of those elements to be able to do that. Right? We're going to look at that in just a moment. Right? And what's the third parental value? I just talked about it just a second ago. I gave the comparison of the two. One appeals to the conscious mind and one appeals to the subconscious mind. Anybody know now? Godly parenting is about discipline resulting in godliness. By the way, in the book, I define this because I get that all the time when somebody will say, I said, what's your goal in parenting? And occasionally somebody will they'll think they know what I'm trying to get. They say, oh, I want to raise godly kids. And I say, really? What is a godly child? What is a godly adult? And so we have to determine what that is. What would you say constitutes a godly adult? So if it's going to result in godliness, what does that mean? What is godliness?
Following God's design.
There you go. You get an A+. See? So your tardiness is completely excused. See there? See, so you can come late and still do good. Okay, that is it. See, until we get that. that it's all about God's design. That's what we're trying to get them to. Now, so why was it critical for me to ask you? There's 15 values in the Living That Matters paradigm. Why?
Because that covers just about everything in God's design.
Well, yeah, as categories, yes, it does. I believe it does anyway. But why have I tried to narrow it down into 15? Because there's more than 15, right? There's more than 15 designs. But why have we tried to put it in these 5 categories and in these 15 values? Why? Because the fact is, look how difficult it is, and we've been going through an intentional plan as men to know that what it means to be manhood that matters is to lead our families to live God's design. And we've been intentionally looking at it for 5 months, 6 months. We're halfway through, right? And yet, we could not answer readily one of those values of the ones that we're looking at right now. Now, I'm not doing that to make you feel guilty, because anybody that knows me, the last thing I'm going to do is play a guilt trip, right? I just don't do guilt. What am I saying? Is that we're not going to pass this down to our children. I had a wonderful, awesome opportunity yesterday. There's 3 families that I've been coaching for 8 years, a little over 8 years. And so I've watched their children growing up. And one family they have a 21-year-old son, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 2-year-old daughter. They like to space things out. So I've watched that. I've known their son, 21-year-old son, since junior high, right? And he's been going through, since junior high, the Living That Matters paradigm with his family. And we have an intentional plan in harmony with his family, with his parents, to help him to become and find the right mate. And he's been on the national rugby team. He's traveled all over the world. He was on the rugby team at UCLA, and now he's in grad school in San Francisco, in chiropractic school on their rugby team. And he met a girl there who's also playing rugby there and is in chiropractic school. And they got to talking about my book, and she was very interested in it, so he saw something in her, and so we talked together, and they are going through my book together with their 2 families. Her family's in Tucson, his family's here, and I met with them and his family yesterday, and they're going through this together, the paradigm, so that at the end of 3 months of going through the paradigm, they can determine if they share those values, and if the families believe that they're in harmony together to do that, they're going to commit to get married, and get married as soon as they practically can. And I'm telling you, when you do it that way, it's all the difference in the world in how it comes out, because they're going through that. But here's what I know. So that young man is in another group we call it Mighty Men of God, that I've been mentoring for 4 years online. Well, all the time they're going through school. They were at different colleges, but on Facebook, on Monday nights, I've been teaching Mighty Men of God these principles of the vows for husbands, vows for wives, right? And here's what I challenge him to. So here's a young man. He's 21 years old. He's a rugby player, a world-class rugby player. He looks like Mowgli. And if you know anything about rugby, it's like football for men, right? Imagine football with no pads, right? It's an amazing sport. I mean, it's the studs of studs, right? But how did he get that way? They train really hard for that. Now he's going to chiropractic school. Now he already got it. He got his BA in business, and then he decided to go to chiropractic school, and so he's studying for that. And I said to him, I want you to think about something. The Living That Matters paradigm and the vows for husbands. If you approached chiropractic school and rugby the same way you approach those, how well do you think you would do? What do you think? I said, why is it that you have to work so hard in chiropractic school to make sure you actually learn something? as opposed to 90% of degrees that are psychology, right? They don't care if they learn anything or not, right? But why going to chiropractic school is it so important that he actually learns the stuff? What's going to happen if he doesn't?
It affects other people.
Yeah, he's going to hurt somebody, right? He's going to break somebody's neck, right? It's important. Well, what happens if we don't learn these values, God's design, and pass it to the next generation? Well, what have we just been talking about for the last 45 minutes? What has happened as a result of us taking it as a hobby, taking it as, well, yeah, I know I need to pass that down, but we'll see how it comes, right? It happens what happened to me. I did not know this stuff when I was raising my kids. I didn't. Last month I asked it, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but I asked how many of us in here, and we had a pretty good crowd, that's maybe the month before maybe it was, and I said, how many of you have at least one adult children that's not following Christ right now? And almost everyone, including myself, raised their hand, right? I've got a son that is not following Christ. I didn't know this stuff. If I could go back and start over, I wouldn't take this as a hobby, right? I would do this different. But guess what? I can't. But you know what I can do? I can ensure that my grandchildren and your grandchildren and my neighbor's grandchildren and those begin to get this right. Okay? That's why this is so critical. But as long as we keep taking it as just, kind of a preference, as a hobby, or yeah, maybe we will or maybe we won't. That's why it's so critical. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I wrote these things, and it took me over a year and a half to memorize all 15 values. So do you get that I'm not trying to make you feel guilty? I don't know why. I had a mental block. I would ask people, and then they would say, well, what is it? And I go, okay, actually, I can't quote it either, right? It was embarrassing for a while. So I'm not doing that to make you feel bad. But what happened when I realized that, I didn't give up. I kept on and kept on until now it's second nature to me. Now these things are just, and I've already shared with you the story, like the vows for husbands, the effect it has on me every day. I'll be saying something to my wife, and it'll pop into my mind. To be a man of honor is to place doing right above being right. Revealing the character of God through my life. I'm not a man of honor unless you say I am. I can't tell you how many times in conversation that pops into my brain. Right? Because it's conditioned in there subconsciously now, and just like making the bed and squeegeeing that shower, I can't help myself. So I'm challenging us as men. We agreed together in here, in the first part of this morning, how bad it is. That it's not right. Okay? Yes?
So you've talked before about the number of young Christians who go through, through their whole life till they get to college,
Yes.
and then they lose it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So how, what's different from this
Yes.
than somebody that's been raised in a...
Yes. Because when the way God's designed it, think about this, going back to Deuteronomy. And again, this is why if you watch and again, you know what I do? And I know this sounds, my wife and I are experiencing the great, of our 47 years together, these last couple of years have been the neatest in terms of living out this paradigm. And one of the things that we've had to force ourselves to do, you might think it's hard for you to get your wife to watch these. Imagine my wife watching me, with me sitting there and doing that. Okay? In fact, imagine me watching me. I'm going, that guy's an idiot. What are you listening to him for? Right? Okay, but I watch him over and over again. My own stuff. Why? Because I want it ingrained in my brain. So what it does is that it's, again, that subconscious training. So Deuteronomy says, when you're lying down, when you're standing up, everywhere you go, it's so much, not a hobby, it's so much who you are all the time that your children will ask you, Dad, why are you always talking about this stuff? And then what was the response that it tells in Deuteronomy? Anybody know? What did he tell them? exactly what we're doing in our study on Nehemiah. Go back and get out the record and tell them everything I've done for you. See, go back and prove to them that I've kept my word. Tell them how I led you out of Egypt. Tell them how I fed you, and tell them how I brought you the promise. And tell them all this stuff, right? See, and do that. But they're going to do it based on the fact that they see that this is your life. It's not a hobby. It's all the time. Now, my dad did not understand the details of how to pass this on, but what my dad did is he did model this stuff for me. I've said many times, my dad is the one that taught me how to love God and how to love people. And my mom and my dad, because my dad, as we're going to look at in a moment, telling us, teaching us and modeling how we to relate to God. So we'll look at them. But my point right now is that these values have to become something that are not a preference, that we take in the same way. And John, I think the answer to your question is that it's because when it becomes non-negotiable, and that is our, that's why I've tried to narrow it down to those, right? Because we can't remember all the stuff of everything. But I think every one of us, if we commit to it, can remember 5 value categories. Spiritual values, relational values, parental values, all right. And I know you can't wait for next month. Sexual values, and financial values. Okay, we can remember 5 categories, right? And 3 values in each of those that I believe can change the way you live your life. You know, some of you know I don't talk about this a lot publicly, but you know, my wife and I have not had a regular income in 7 years. And yet, we've never failed to pay a bill. We've never missed any of that. And it's always stuff that comes up. But the reason is the way that I follow. My financial focus always is those 3 financial values. Nothing belongs to me. Everything belongs to God. I'm simply a steward of His assets. The world operates in a system of buying and selling. God operates in a system of giving and receiving. Living in the body of Christ is true communism. Everybody reacts when I say that. But when we get to that, we'll have fun with that. But see what I'm saying? That's how I live my life financially, according to those 3 designs. When you go to Christian financial seminars, you might hear one of those. Most of it's how to manage money, right? How to not be in debt, or how to do all those. And that's good. And by the way, in my book, if you read it, I promote those things. I think those are great seminars. But they're meaningless if you don't understand God's financial design. So, John, the answer to that question, and it's a great question, because how can we be secure in that? Well, because God's design is that it is when it becomes, when they see in us. It's what Mike was saying about his dad. His dad could say that to him all day long. But it was evident to Mike that that was not his value. Right? Those were not his values. Why should Mike embrace those if those weren't his dad's values? See? So that's why I say it's so important. We're not going to get this concept if we don't ourselves first embrace these and say, I need to be committed to even at least knowing what these are. When I told you I had these families that I would mentor, both in a group or privately, and when I go through the vows for husbands and wives with these families together, and when we get to the man of safety, to be a man of safety, to use my authority to diligently fight to free you from all physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bondage, to be your knight in shining armor, right? And when I would explain that to the men in front of their wives, every time, by the time I got done, the women would be sobbing, and the men would be like a deer caught in headlights, right? You're looking, okay, what's going on with my wife? Why is she upset? Because she so wanted that safety. She so wanted to be protected in that way. So then I would challenge the men to, I said, all I want you to do is to memorize these vows. I don't want you to learn them or understand them or try to figure them out. I just want you to memorize them. And I said, because your life right now is being held captive by a vicious, evil captor who is not only keeping her in bondage and torturing her every day, but he's convincing her that you're the reason. This enemy is actually convincing your wife that you're the enemy, that you're the reason she's being tortured. That's what he's convincing her of, right? And I said, and so you're the only one that can free her from that bondage. And so all I want you to do right now is to memorize that. So weeks later, I'd ask the guys, so I was going, well, I get answers like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Can you send those to me again? Okay, send them to again. Weeks later, okay, how you doing on that? Oh, yeah, no, I forgot that. I was going to get those out. And if you do look at the 90-day challenge, you'll see talking about how you do that. You do it. And again, some people have a difficult time memorizing, but I'm not talking about how hard it is to memorize. I'm talking about they weren't even starting. They weren't even trying to do it. And so then I would say, okay, one of two things. Either you did not believe me that your wife literally is in that bondage and Satan's convincing her that you're the enemy. Either you didn't believe me or you don't care. Which is it? Okay, because again, so in these parental values now, I'm saying we can turn this around. Now again, my kids, I messed them up in ways that's unimaginable, that I can't change. But from here forward, and for the rest of society, I can still, it will actually come back around and make it better for my kid. I'm working with a dad right now who lost his son, and he had 6 kids, and so he has a grandson that he's basically raising. He didn't know any of this stuff when he was raising his kids, so they're all away from God. All his other 5 children that are living, none of them are serving Christ or following Christ. But we have a plan right now that we are investing in his grandson, and we believe that when he gets older, he's going to be the one to bring his children back to Christ. By raising him in that, he'll be the evangelist, and I really believe that. So see, I can't fix what I did to my kids, but if I trust God's design, God can bring healing. This is the story of Nehemiah. This is the story of what we're going through, that repairing. And I love Pastor David here, the approach that he took in this study of Nehemiah, calling it repairing broken things. Because that's what it is. It's seeing, look, when you get off this God's design, what happens? Some of you know that I've been helping my brother who's disabled. He's in a wheelchair. And he is a textbook on living outside of God's design. He was a pastor for many years, and he was a school teacher, and you know that. He has 10 children by 3 different wives. He made some horrible mistakes in his life. He's writing his autobiography, rewriting it actually, and the name of it's going to be Living That Doesn't Matter, Living Outside of God's Design. He's going to parallel my book and show how, here's what happens when you violate that. He was really, really discouraged because he's turned his life around. He's doing really well with God. But now he's got, these teen kids that most of which don't speak to him or anything. And he was discouraged, but I'm trying to help him to see when you simply take a stand and get back on track, God can repair that legacy. And you can leave behind for them something that they may not ever even acknowledge until, and it may be even 2 or 3 generations down the road. You may not be here to see it. But what are you going to do? Just decide that it's too late and not leave that for them? Or are you going to give them something behind that can leave that behind? So we're working on the legacy binder together, which, because they're telling me he probably has maybe 3 or 4 years left that he'll live. And during that time, he's going to use it to rebuild that and put together that legacy binder to leave behind for his children. A legacy. And that's what a legacy is, living behind a tangible thing. So imagine his grandchildren someday reading that legacy binder and seeing the story of what happens when you don't follow Christ and when you turn it around. Okay? And one of the things we're going to be doing is paralleling guys like Samson. Samson was a, can I say SOB? He was, even when he was doing, God using him, The guy was a pretty arrogant, right? And yet, and he blew it badly. But it was the last moment of his life that God used him in that powerful way, right? To do that. Even in death, God used him. So my point of that is that my concern is that if you're like me, and you start thinking about this, Satan will bring so much discouragement at how bad I've blown it, that we let that sidetrack us, and so we don't just start where we can and embrace these values where they're. So start with simply coming to know what these 15 values are. Pay attention to them. Don't worry about how it's going to work or not work or whatever, right? Let's just begin with this, and together. This is the midway point. Are you beginning to get the picture of how serious, how important it is that we as men, we can start a movement that can change it? So what's the goal or purpose of parenting?
Raise godly children.
To raise godly children. And again, what does that mean? Because that, so if we're raising them, what are we raising them? If we're raising them to be godly children, what does that mean? So think about this. What's the first commandment God gave to it when they did the first marriage? He brought Adam and Eve together. What did he tell them? Be fruitful and multiply, right? Okay, multiply what?
Themselves.
We're going to get to the sexual values next month. Okay, what's that?
Themselves.
Okay, themselves. Okay, but think about this, because the obvious blinds us from the truth. Of course, it means literally, because it said, be fruitful and multiply and do what? Fill the earth. Right? Okay? Yeah, some translates it replenish, but it means to fill. It means literally to populate it. Okay? But for what purpose? We can't know that and understand that until we go back to what's the purpose of marriage? Go back to the relational values. What's the purpose of marriage? What's the first relational value? Now everybody's afraid. Don't be afraid. It's okay. What's the first relational value? See, if you start seeing the patterns here, it's a lot easier. All the first values of each 5 category are the same. What's the first relational value? Okay, what was the first parental value? That we just did 10 minutes ago.
It's not about us.
It's not about us, it's about them. All right, now think about that. Think the pattern. What's the first spiritual value? It's not about me, it's about God. Right? What did I just quote to you in the financial value? It's not, nothing belongs to me, everything belongs to God. First sexual value. My body doesn't belong to me, it belongs to God. Right? So what's the first relational value?
Not about us.
It's not about us, it's about God. Right? See how you start getting these patterns? Why? Because God's design is consistent. Right? It's orderly. It follows these patterns. By the way, one of the most brilliant things I've seen in many years is you had to make Bob really proud. His granddaughter did a speech on the Fibonacci principle. If you don't know what Fibonacci is, he was a mathematician. The Fibonacci principle, these patterns that are everywhere in the universe that fit. And she used that. What is she, 13? And talking about proving God by the Fibonacci principle of math. Okay? It's these patterns that you can see everywhere in the universe, the consistency of God. And by the way, you know who Mikhail, whatever, he's this Asian scientist that you see all the time on whenever the news interviews a scientist, he's the guy, and he's been an atheist. You know that he's been coming out lately saying, I'm having to change my view. I can no longer deny that what I'm seeing in the universe could not happen without a designer. It's mind-blowing to hear this guy saying it. He's just being, in integrity. He can't deny it, right? He's saying, I see that. So these patterns that are there. So the purpose of marriage is to say, if it's not about us, it's about God, then what is it about? He brought, remember, male and female together, because a man by himself is not the full reflection of the glory and image of God. A woman by herself is not the full reflection of the glory and image of God. When you join them together through the relationship of the role of husband and wife, we get this incredible picture reflection of the glory and image of God. So the purpose of marriage is to do what? Reflect the glory and image of God. Right? So from this now we can extrapolate, what are we multiplying? The glory and image of God. What are we populating the earth with? The glory and image of God. By having children and then raising them to. So how do we reflect the glory and image of God? In marriage, through the role of husband and wife. All right? So how are our children going to reflect the glory and image of God? By getting married, and through the relationship with their husbands, with their wives, reflect the glory and image of God. Okay, now does that begin to make sense? So it's a completely true answer to say, yeah, to raise godly children. But if we don't get that that's what this means, that raising godly children means that we're going to multiply, and that's always been God's design, through procreation, to populate that. Okay, what did he tell it? What was the promise to Abraham? See, it was all about procreation. It was all about, multiplying that. To do it in that way. Okay, to reflect the glory and image of God. All right. So what's the primary role of a father? I'm going to go home and watch all the videos so I can. So next month, you'll have to. No, actually, because it'll be the following month which you'll watch the videos. You can come and impress your wives next. What's that?
Raise children.
And remember, I'm specifically talking father, the way that we know. Now, we talked about what the purpose of parenting is and raising that. What is the role of father? How does it accomplish that?
Raise children in God's design.
Okay, that's a great answer.
Be the spiritual leader of your household.
Yes, those are all true things. But to model for his children how God views them and how God loves them, primarily, though not exclusively, by the way he relates to his wife. Parenting has way more to do with how you relate to your wife than it does how you relate to your children. Now, if you watch the videos, remember the metaphor that I used of the puzzle? Do you remember that? If you give your kids a 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, dump all the pieces out on the table and then throw the box top away. Okay, put it together. How successful do you think they'll be? How difficult do you think that will be to put that together without that picture?
Really tough.
Yeah, you got to have that picture to follow. If they're not seeing that model. So now, by the way, so many studies have been done showing that people, the way that people view how God sees them is directly related to how they view their Father sees them. People tend to relate to God the way they relate to their Father. There's been a lot of studies that talk about this, that show this. So that if you have a father that really doesn't talk to you, that's really not around, you tend to view God that way. Yeah, I believe in God. He's there. He takes care of me, but, it's not really personal. He just out there does his thing, right? If you have a father that's very engaged in your life and personal like that, you tend to view God that way. It's not always, but I'm just saying as a pattern that's pretty true. So my point is that what a father does primarily in the way that he relates to his wife, models. And this is true because I know some of you experience it. This is true even if you're divorced or estranged from your wife and those kinds of things. This can still be true because it still is going to show the way you handle it. I did a funeral for a woman who had divorced her husband like 20 years ago. And his grown adult children got up and testified at the funeral telling how their father had functioned more as a godly husband after the divorce for 20 years than most husbands do that are living with their wives. In other words, financial responsibilities, emotional support, all those kinds of things. Even though the wife, had made a decision and a choice they said it was her choices. She wasn't, in other words, she wasn't saying he necessarily did something wrong. She just had to think, but he continued to function in that way. Now, I'm not saying everybody's got to do exactly like that, but what that showed, every one of these testified that it was in some ways mitigated for them the fact that their parents were divorced and they had to live with that and go through that. But because of what they saw in their father, it proved to them the love of God and what could be. It was a hard thing. In fact, honestly, I don't know how he did it. It's mind-blowing to me to think about that. So I'm just telling you the story. I'm telling you what they. So this modeling for our children in the way that and you saw in the video where I talk about the fact that I hear this all the time where a man will say to me, look, Pastor, I know I'm not a very good husband. At least I'm a good father. That's impossible. You cannot be a good father and not be a good husband. Now, I'm not saying you don't have problems as a husband. This is not talking about perfection. It's saying in the way that even the problems gives them and shows how God does that. So if you didn't already, watch those videos. And again, I'm going to pray for me because hopefully by the end of this 10 months, we'll have all the websites done. And it'll have a lot of the other resources to help you to follow through on this. Because remember, this is a lifelong journey. The 10 months is simply to expose you to the paradigm and the principle of how to get this stuff. And spend the rest of your life, learning it and doing it, right? Okay? So what's the primary role of a mother? If the primary role of a father is to model for his children how God views them, how God loves them, then what's the primary role of a mother?
It's to do something nurturing, probably. Nurturing the family.
Well, that's actually a good answer, because she does do that, absolutely. Okay? So think about this. Balance this out. The yin and the yang. If the father models how God views us, what does the mother model?
It models how we view God.
How we view God. And how we love God. Right? So in the way, primarily and not exclusively, in the way she relates to her husband, imagine a wife that every night, the anticipation of waiting for her husband to come home is modeling for her children. Wow. You know how exciting it is when Dad comes home? I love it when he comes in. And we want to be there, and we want to show him respect and honor and get it. Can you imagine what that's teaching them about how to relate to God? About how we do that. A woman that disrespects her husband and does not show that passion and love like that cannot expect her children to have that for him and for God. It's going to be rare that happens in that way. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why I think that fathers need to become experts at Proverbs. And in this last video, if you saw, remember we talked about layering, and it talked about the whole concept of layering, the metaphor I used on layering, parental layering. It all comes from the first 5 chapters of Proverbs. Proverbs is really about what? Who wrote Proverbs? Solomon. That's both. Solomon. Okay? Solomon was said to be the wisest man that ever lived. God gave him great wisdom. And wisdom, in its purest form, wisdom is seeing the world through God's eyes. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is being able to see through God's eyes. That's wisdom. And what Proverbs tends to do is to say, okay, you see it this way, but here's the way God views the universe. This is what God sees. So the first 5 chapters of Proverbs is Solomon saying to his sons, if you want to be successful in life, you better listen to me. I'm going to tell you how God sees things. Forget about how you think it should be. Forget it. If you don't follow it God's way, if you don't see things God's way, you're going to fail, right? And so he's imparting to them the wisdom of God. I think every mother should become an expert at Psalms. What does Psalms primarily do for us? What does Psalms give us? Praise. Okay? Psalms is the go-to place for when we do worship songs or any of those things. Why? It's all about David modeling for us, this is how we approach God. In fact, this is where when I teach this, when we do Manhood That Matters next year, boy, you're gonna have to really help me on that to get your wise, because I will tell you one of the things I'll probably get tarred and feathered on. Okay, would you agree with me that as men we don't like discontent?
We don't want.
We do not like discontent. In other words, the worst thing is, you know those dreaded words when your wife looks at you and says, "We need to talk," or you know, she's got something to voice or to tell. We don't like discontent, right? We just don't like it. I mean, we want to. If I took 100 couples off the street at random, and I took one at a time, the men and then the women, and I asked the men, "How do you think your marriage is? How's your marriage going?" 9 out of 10 men would say something like, "It's okay. So, I mean, it's not perfect, but whose is, right? We try, we work on it, it's all right." 9 out of 10 of the women within 2 minutes are going to be crying and telling me how bad it is and how much they hurt, right? You see all this stuff. Men are going, "Come on." It's like, why are you so miserable all the time? Why can't you just enjoy what we got, right? And why? Why do men so not like discontent? Who else doesn't like discontent? God, right? And we are modeling Him, right? We're modeling that. We're made in His image, and that's the part of Him that we reflect. Okay, God doesn't like discontent. And what was His people all through the Old Testament doing? Constantly grumbling and complaining and doing all that, right? So David gives us this great model for how to express discontent to God. And what was it? Here's a classic kind of prayer that David would pray. Say, "God, how long are you going to let my enemies keep whooping me? God, have you forgotten me? God, what's going on? Why do you... It feels like, God, only the wicked are prospering. God, I don't understand that. Oh, by the way, God, you are so great. You are so awesome. You are such a great God. I am so grateful for you, God. My whole life, I just thirst for you every day." You get what just happened there? All of his expression is discontent is bathed in what? Praise. Praise and adoration. All right? I need to teach your wives that they cannot express discontent to you unless it's bathed and clothed in praise and adoration. Right?
You'll get tarred and feathered.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So if you want to really learn how to treat your husbands, you got to learn to praise them, right? So you can see the difference that makes. So when we do Womanhood That Matters, they've got to get that. So be praying now, right?
You may get tarred and feathered, but we'll take you up for step.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's a plan. Okay, I'll do my part. You guys do your part. You can help me scrape the tar and feathers off. Okay, so so see that difference in how that balances out there is that for them to learn. So that's why they do Psalms and we do Proverbs, and we get to balance that. So those two things will model for our children. They'll have a right relationship. And what we're really saying, we're modeling for them the spiritual values in the way that we relate to each other as husbands and wives. And again, that goes back again to John's earlier question. It's this modeling, and sadly, see, we it's the same thing I said before about how we've gotten it backwards, where it's not the church to be the model for the family, but the family the model for the church. Well, it's that we don't do great parenting, and that somehow is going to create. In fact, do you know that a lot of people, they have babies thinking that's going to fix their marital problems? And you know, it not only does it, it exacerbates them. Why? Because they're missing the point. It's the other way around. See, that great relational deal provides the great parenting. That's where that comes from. That's what we've got to get to. Okay, so what are we training our children for then? What has this whole discussion been about and leading up to? And what do we say? What are we training our children? So if it's discipline, which is training and is teaching, and if you didn't watch the videos yet, make sure you watch those with your family. And again, like me, we watch them over and over again. What are we training our children for? When, okay, what's that?
Living by God's design.
Okay, yeah, which, in particular, what part of God's design?
For a parent to be,
To
Husband.
multiply, reflecting the glory and image of God. And how do we reflect the glory and image of God? Through our marriage, right? So think about this. Could you imagine, again, this young man imagine that he just decided to skip chiropractic school and go get an office. And then 6 weeks before the office opens, he says, "Oh man, I need a chiropractor to come in and show me over the next 6 weeks how to pop necks." How successful do you think that'll be? And yet that's the way we approach training our kids for marriage. Okay, so how many here sent your kids to school when they're growing up? Why?
So they can learn.
Learn what?
Productive,
Writing.
so they can be productive adults.
Why? How is that going to make a productive adult?
So they can earn a living.
Okay, to earn a living, right? And did some of them went to college, some of them didn't, all right? But they go, or like in the case of this young man, he's going to chiropractic school. Why? So he could learn how to be, okay, we get this in every other area of life. Again, if you read the book, I go through a whole thing of parents that focus on different areas, the degree they go to make sure their children are prepared for that. So if you're a sports-minded family, how many years did you spend coaching baseball? Yeah.
Well, probably 10, 12.
Wow, that's awesome. And so you were hands-on right there, you know, helping your son to be prepared to be the best that he can be in that sport. If a family is like, say, entertainment-minded, right? They got their kids baby headshots before they could even walk, right? They've got them acting coaches and they've got them singing, dancing coaches, right? If they're focused on education, they're wanting to get them in a Montessori or you know whatever the latest greatest now is, right? Every other area of life, we go to great lengths, and nobody has to tell us how. We go find out how, right? If we decide that's what we want our kids to be, we find the resources. We go buy them whatever equipment they need. We get them the lessons or whatever. We get them in a club, sports, whatever, right? We don't go around saying, "Oh, I just didn't know what to do." No, we passionately go find it. But I would make the case, and I've argued it many times throughout our study, the most important roles they will ever play is that of husband and father, wife and mother. And we do very little intentionally to prepare them for those roles. And we think if they go through premarital counseling just before they get married, somehow that's gonna get them ready for it. Instead of preparing them from the time they're born. So we're preparing. Parenting is all about preparing our children, training them intentionally for those great roles of father and mother, husband and wife. Does that make sense? That's what the parental values have been about. Now, what I did with this family yesterday, I don't think you can really see that. I'm going to actually email this whole thing out. And I'm going to do at some point a Saturday all-day seminar on just this thing. And that is the dating paradigm of how do you then do this. And this is phase 4 of that paradigm. So it's when they're at a stage that they are ready to seriously begin finding a mate and all that. And so there's 4 assessments here that you do in partnership with your family to do that, right? To find that. And so I went through that with this family yesterday. So the first is this availability assessment. You shouldn't even be doing anything on it. I don't think you should be in any relationship or anything if you're not ready to be married right now. Because what happens is they get in these open-ended long-term relationships and there's no possibility that they can get married right now. Right? So they shouldn't be in that relationship at all. The second is the shape character assessment. is how do you determine what's your shape, what's your wiring, the way you are, and your character. What kind of character do you have? The myth that you have to spend these years getting to know each other to see if you're compatible is a myth. It doesn't work. We know now by all the studies that you can date somebody for 10 years and really not know them. But what this is about is having a way. It does not take. It's not complicated to find out what somebody's shape and what their values are. Right? And then the next assessment is the values assessment. And this covenant, to look at, so what this couple is doing, that I'm coaching, is they're going through the Living That Matters paradigm together to see if they're in agreement on those 15 values. Would you say that's more important than some of the other things we try to determine if we have this attraction or whatever? See, those other things can build and grow. This, you either are or you're not. You're in harmony on these things or you're not. And most people never know this till years into the marriage. When things come up and they say, oh, wow, I wish I'd known that before. I didn't know you didn't believe kids should do whatever, right? We have no clue what their values or their character is. And then finally, the family assessment. In other words, the reality of two families coming together who God's given the vision and insight to partner with and to say, no, you should not be with that woman, or you should not be with that man, or this is biblically the way it was done. By the way, marriage license and marriage, the formality of weddings really didn't start coming to being until about the 16th century, the 1600s, when the church started to find out they could make money off of it. But what was it before then? It wasn't just, you didn't just walk up and say, okay, I pick you, come on, let's go, we're now married. No, it was families. It was families. The families made that decision. And right up until, in America, right up until not that many years ago, 100 and something years ago, that's the way it was. There was no formality of marriage licenses and things. What would you do is you would publish, the only real law came to being where it said you had to publish that you were going to get married, so that if anybody wanted to come and say, you remember the old thing, anyone who has anything to say why these shouldn't be together, speak now or forever hold your peace, right? So you had to give notification so people could come and say that. But it was the families that did that. We need to get back to that paradigm where families are directly involved in and it's funny, I think if we were doing this, we wouldn't be nearly as having to deal with the things like same-sex marriage and stuff to the degree that we are, had we not gotten away from this model and paradigm. We're just not passing that down. So anyway, I'll be sending this out, but we'll do, I'm not sure when, but sometime, probably in the early fall, we want to do an all-day Saturday seminar going through this, with showing you how to partner with with your adult children, but also with your children that are grown and have kids, to help them to do it as grandparents with your children, to start this process here with your grandchildren now while they're young. So I think every child growing up, this should be just the standard family. This is what our family does. Like I said, in the same way that I said I never had to get up and ask if we were going to church on Sunday, I think every kid should grow up just knowing, no, this is what we do. Doesn't everybody do that? What, you don't have a family agreement to help you find your right mate when you get older? But every kid did that, right? They grew up actually believing that this is the way everybody does it. And by the way, down there, there's links in here when I send it out. You'll be able to go to these different things to see the background on this. But there's the story of, remember, in the Bible where they would send out, the dad would send a servant to go find that wife with the criteria that was the family criteria for what you're looking for in that mate. As a family, the values, those were more important, right? And to do that. And we're very far away from that. So, I hope, I really prayed over this. I did not want in any way to put any kind of a guilt trip on anybody. Because if anybody should have a guilt trip, it would be me. I mean, teach this stuff and I still have blown it, right? And so I can't stand up here and brag as the perfect example. I'm working on it just like you. I'm the classic example. You remember the old commercial? I'm not only the president of the Hair Club for Men, I'm also a client. Remember that guy? Okay, hey, I'm also a client. I'm having to rebuild and redo this stuff because I blew it very badly. But I'm not willing to just lay down. I'm taking it seriously now. And I'm trying to work on these things and get it myself. So I'm challenging you. Don't take lightly the whole structure of the Manhood That Matters thing, where you're one of the reasons why we do it in the format that we do, where I ask you 1 month, you're watching the videos with your wife, and I didn't really get a chance to. One of the things we were going to do with the wives meeting here today, and I'll just send out a video of this, is to go through the legacy binder to see, okay, how do you do this part of the parental values in the legacy binder? So I'll send out some instructions on that. And why? Because again, it's something my wife and I are working on for our 7 children. Because we didn't raise them with that, we're hoping sometime in the next 1 to 2 years to have a fully populated legacy binder that we can give to each of them. And we're going to have a ceremony. Now, we won't be able to do that with all of them. Some of them we're going to just have to get it to them and hope that someday, where we can't see them because they don't want to acknowledge that, give me the satisfaction that they're looking at it. Someday they'll look at it and maybe God touch their heart and seeing that. But the other one, so we're working to give that to them, to at least they'll have that. Saying things like, one of the things that'll be in that I was going to talk about today, we're developing scripts, and I'm talking to this video guy that's going to help to put together a thing to be able to do this, is doing interviews of you and your wife, of your parents, of things like that, on video. It'll go into your legacy binder that your children, remember I asked, wouldn't it be great if you could click on a link right now and see a video of your great-great-grandfather telling the story of his life? We have that of my parents and my wife's parents. We have the videos that we interviewed them. And I'll have scripts of how to do that. So you interview your wife and she interviews you. It's something that you'll pass down. It'll be, forever to pass down that legacy. Okay? So we've got a long ways to go, but what I'm hoping today is that you'll see, we started out today by talking about how great is the need. We've seen the result in society. And, all the theoreticians have all the reasons why they think that we're in the mess we're in. Why the millennials are leaving the church, or why, that. But when you really look at them, most of them miss the basic element that we simply are not living the way God designed for it to be. It's not complicated. It is in the fact that we gotta, and that's why I said, and I close with this, is that when I coach these families, my most difficult thing, it takes about 2 years to unlearn the stuff we know that's not right before we really start grasping this stuff. That's why I love the healing steps and the identity and destiny. So, Lord, thank you that you're in control of all this. I pray that, I know the enemy would want to discourage us right now, would want to give us a negative view of all this. But I'm asking that you'd fill us with a sense of hope and wonder that, God, you can bring healing, you can turn this around, and we can still leave an amazing legacy for our children and our grandchildren. And in fact, God, I believe we don't have a choice. We have to. We've got to do it. We can't afford to be discouraged because we can't let anything distract us. And discouragement, for me, I know that derails me every time. And I just don't do anything because I'm too discouraged about what I've blown so far. So God, give us that hope that we can turn this around. I put this into your hand. I put these men. God, thank you for these men. I'm so grateful that they've been faithful, that they've been here every month. And so bless their wives. Help them when I put this, when I get the video of this out, that they'll be able to sit down and watch it with their wives and see all this stuff together. So we praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Sam.